Chapter 29 Vaguely Human. The sun had long since set over Los Santos, and the bedroom of Jeff's Rockford Hills penthouse had gradually sunk into darkness without the occupants really noticing. Jack lingered in the doorway for a moment, peering in. Jeremy was hunched over his laptop, the only light in the room now coming from the screen, reflecting on his face, which was far too close to be considered healthy. He'd been like that for the better part of 3 hours, while Ryan slept, dead to the world, on the bed beside him. Jack felt almost like he was intruding. With a pang of guilt, he realized the last time the three of them had been alone in a room together. Both Jeremy and Ryan had been restrained. He wasn't proud of that. But it was done. He'd made his apologies. They'd moved forward. It didn't stop him from feeling terrible about it. Jack flicked on the light as he entered. Better to disturb Ryan than let Jeremy send himself blind, he reasoned. Jeremy looked up, startled, but Ryan didn't show any signs of waking. It had been nearly 24 hours since the sedatives had kicked in, and his body clearly needed the rest. Jack put down a bowl of Jeff's home-cooked beef goulash on the table next to Jeremy and pushed it towards him. "You missed dinner," Jack pointed out. "It's my watch now anyway. The guys are playing Worms in the living room if you want to go." They'd decided that until things died down, they should stay together at Jeff's penthouse. The official reason was for security, but it was also so they could keep an eye on one another. After the traumatic events of the past few days, they weren't sure how they'd cope once it had all sunk in. They were still running on the fear and adrenaline high and had no idea how long it would take to break. Quietly, all eyes were still on Ryan. After Lindsay had slipped in the sedatives at the lumberyard safe house, the crew moved him on with them, and although he woke up for brief periods as they shuffled him from the safe house to the car to the penthouse, he had still not been entirely lucid. At Lindsay's suggestion, they'd decided it would be best not to let Ryan wake up alone in a new place, and so they had taken shifts staying with him, hanging out in his room just in case. Lindsay had changed the dressings on some of his wounds that needed it, including the brand. For the first time, she'd gotten a good look at it. It wasn't infected, but the wound was horrific. It was going to scar deeply. She supposed that was the point. The letters were scratchy, but instantly recognizable. The only way he was ever going to be able to get rid of it would be something like surgery. She knew he wouldn't have approved, but she pitied him. While the others had gone to help Jeff with dinner and eat, Jeremy had stayed with Ryan and had gotten back into investigating Shadle's identity, pulling out all the information he was able to get his hands on about the heist at the Maze Bank and the Vagabond's 8-cop killing spree that day. Jeremy put the laptop down on the table, leaned back, and stretched his arms overhead, his back popping from being in the same position for so long. "Thanks, Jack." He picked up the bowl but made no effort to move, looking over at Ryan. "I think I'm going to stay for a bit longer, though." He fell upon the food, realizing how hungry he actually was. From the living room, they could hear an indignant squawk from Gavin, closely followed by the faint laughter of Michael and Jeff. Jack nodded. "Find anything about Shadles?" His mouth full of stew, Jeremy just shook his head. Jack looked at Ryan, still out cold in his bed, still wearing the scrubs from the hospital and Jeff's worn gray t-shirt. His hands and face were still crusted with burgundy remains of dried blood. Jack scowled. "I'll be back in a sec." Jeremy set about devouring the goulash, and a few minutes later, Jack returned with a bowl of warm water and a washcloth. Jeremy raised an eyebrow. "You're giving him a sponge bath?" he asked with a quiet chuckle, mouth still half full of food. Jack rolled his eyes. "He's fucking still covered in blood. It's disgusting." "You'll wake him up," Jeremy warned. "He's slept enough. It's been what, nearly 24 hours? He'll need to eat something soon anyway." Jack sat on the edge of the bed as he dipped the washcloth in the water and squeezed out most of the excess. He gently started to wipe the blood from Ryan's forehead, a few drops of water running down over his face as he did. Suddenly, Ryan's eyes snapped open. He grabbed Jack's arm, holding the washcloth, and yanked it away from his face, throwing Jack sideways and making him yelp in shock. Jeremy bounced to his feet, sending his bowl clattering to the floor, spilling the last of his goulash. "Ryan, it's okay. It's us. It's us." Ryan was sitting bolt upright in bed, still gripping Jack's arm, trying to catch his breath from the shock and sudden exertion. His body pumped adrenaline and his heart raced, his mind struggling to catch up. His head whipped around, eyes darting about the room as he tried to get his bearings. There was something terrifyingly animalistic and instinctive in his movements, and it became very clear why Lindsay recommended they didn't leave him to wake up alone. "Ryan," Jeremy soothed. It's okay. Let go of Jack. Jack gently pried Ryan's hand off his arm, giving it a gentle, reassuring squeeze in his own as Ryan worked out what was going on. It's okay. You're safe, Jack assured him. We're at Jeff's. We're all here, and everyone's okay. Ryan looked around and took a few deep breaths, slowly nodding at comprehension. Not being waterboarded. In the penthouse, with the crew. Safe. Sorry, he breathed, withdrawing his hand from Jack's. He noticed Jack's rubbing his wrist where he'd grabbed him, red marks in the shape of fingers just visible. He cringed. It's all right. Jack picked up the washcloth and threw it at him. Might want to wipe your face, though. Ryan looked down at the cloth, then down at his filthy clothes, wrinkling his nose at the smell. I think I need more than that. I might go take a shower. He frowned at his still uncooperative legs. He dreaded to think what the bruising and swelling was like under the scrubs. Or, I suppose, maybe a bath or something. Jack pulled a face and nodded at him. That's a really good idea. Ryan clutched his head, suddenly feeling like his skull was too small for his brain, his face contorted in pain. Yeah, okay. Gonna need some painkillers too, and maybe some water. We got you, buddy. Jeremy grinned at him and went to fetch what he needed, and something to clean up the goulash. Luckily, Jeff always made extra. Ryan was starting to feel vaguely human again. Clean for the first time in days, painkillers dulling the throbbing in his head and muscles, although he'd refused to take any sedatives after the first round in the state he'd woken up in. He was still shaken from the thought of nearly hurting Jeff and Lindsay. He didn't want to add any more names to that list. It could have been worse with Jack. You're safe. You're with the crew, he reminded himself as he got dressed. Jeff's penthouse was big enough for all of them to have their own rooms, and they all kept a staple wardrobe there, a few t-shirts, an extra pair of pants, underwear, pajamas. It was a similar story in every safe house. Ask him any day, and he'd swear blind he owned more clothes as a criminal than a fashion model. Going for comfort over style, he pulled on a loose-fitting pair of plaid pajama pants and a soft navy blue t-shirt with an animal rescue slogan that he couldn't remember the origin story of. It was now late in the evening, but the others were still awake and probably would be for some time. He didn't think he'd get any sleep tonight at any rate. He'd slept enough. His legs were responsive, but extensively bruised and not up to supporting his weight, so he reluctantly got back in the wheelchair and went out to see the others. Good morning, Sleeping Beauty, Jeff greeted him with a curious smile. Absolutely nothing about that statement is true, Ryan retorted with a smirk. It earned him a giggle from the lads. How are you feeling? Jack asked sincerely. Ryan thought for a moment. About 1,000,000 times better than I've felt in days. But that said, I still feel like a bag of dicks. So lumpy, Jeremy joked, but he was quickly interrupted by Michael. Told you you'd be fine. Pay up, Gavin. Ryan frowned at him. Gavin, ye of little faith. I thought you'd be more messed up, Ryan, you know, he admitted sheepishly, slipping Michael $10. Ryan snorted, barely suppressing a chuckle. You asshole. Gavin looked hurt. No, but I would definitely be messed up. So it's kind of like a compliment, he tried to explain. Ryan shook his head but grinned. You know, it's funny how your compliments are rarely actually compliments, Gavin. But hey, you're the one who lost money over it, so... Now who's the asshole, Ryan? Gavin grinned back at him. Ryan just shook his head with a smirk. Still you. Michael let out a burst of giggles that set Jeremy and Gavin off, too. The banter was reassuring. It felt natural, normal, not as forced as it actually was. Jeff dished up another bowl of the stew for Ryan, which he ate very slowly, careful not to upset his stomach. But in that moment, it was the best thing he'd ever eaten, and it took all his willpower not to just down the whole bowl. Something about Jeff's cooking was always comforting. It helped everyone feel better. So what'd I miss? He asked through a mouthful of stew. The guys tag-teamed telling the story, filling him in on what they did with the body, how it had made the news, and they'd used the footage for their video. They explained why they were in Jeff's apartment and how Lindsay had regrouped with the B team to start damage control. They conveniently left off the part about drugging him and let him assume he'd simply succumbed to exhaustion. Oh yeah, Jeremy piped up from his spot, cross-legged on the floor. I got your samples, too. Fingerprints and hair with skin tags. Michael snickered. Yeah, I doubt the LSPD will have much luck with the evidence we left them. They might be able to pull dental records, Ryan mused, mostly to himself. Thanks, Jeremy. I haven't had any luck finding anything about Shadles in the police databases, though, Jeremy was quick to add. Of the 8 police officers that died that day, none of them had a brother in the force, or sister. I thought to check, just in case, and none of them were twins. Something about that didn't sound right, but Ryan couldn't put his finger on it. He nodded. Thanks for trying. Good thing you got those prints. I'll send them off tomorrow. The LSPD don't come up with something before then. Ryan was itching to get back to doing his own digging into Shadle's identity, but the way the others were looking at him made him very conscious of the fact they were all waiting to see how he was going to handle this. Subtlety wasn't exactly their specialty, and it wasn't new territory for him. Instead, he positioned himself next to the couch and grabbed one of the controllers. So, what are we playing? They played various games into the early hours of the morning, and gradually the others retired to their bedrooms. First Jeff, then Jack and Michael, and eventually Gavin, until it was only Ryan and Jeremy left absently playing racing games in near silence, with only the occasional jab thrown out at the other's misfortune or congratulations at a win. After a while, Jeremy looked over at Ryan, a soft but serious expression on his face. Something was clearly on his mind that he'd been thinking about for a while. You know, he said quietly, you don't have to be strong for anyone anymore. After what you've been through, no one expects you to be okay straight away. Ryan froze up. His on-screen character unceremoniously missed a turn and plunged over the side of a cliff, the car slowly sinking into the water below, his character not even attempting to escape from the vehicle as he silently drowned. I mean, you repeatedly put yourself through hell for the crew. You took a beating for me. Jeremy cringed, correcting himself. Because of me. Ryan found his voice as his character respawned. Hey, we're battle buddies. We gotta look out for each other. Jeremy paused the game and looked over at Ryan. Well, this is me looking out for you now, Ryan. If there's anything you need to get off your chest, whatever you gotta say, I'm here. And if there's anything I can do, just let me know when it's done. Ryan was momentarily taken aback. Jeff and Lindsay had already said similar things, and it shouldn't have shocked him as much as it did, but hearing it come from Jeremy, he wasn't used to being seen as anything short of undoubting, unafraid, cold, and calculating, even by the crew. It was an image he himself had carefully crafted, under the mask and paint of the vagabond. It was easy to forget that under all that, he was still Ryan, something that sometimes even he forgot. Thanks, Lil J. Ryan mumbled with a weak smile. One more race? I kind of fucked up that last one. Jeremy chuckled quietly. Yeah, you did. Alright, one more, then I'm gonna hit the hay. Jeremy restarted the race, and they were about halfway through the second lap when Ryan came to the realization that there was only one thing he really wanted. Hey, Jeremy. I really appreciate your help with tracking down Shadles, who he was, what his story was. I don't want to bring it up in front of the others. I don't want them to worry. Jeremy scoffed as he cut a corner and pulled into first ahead of Ryan. Dude, they're worried anyway. But I get where you're coming from. It's a bit obsessive. Ryan shook his head, his character throwing a proximity mine out the car window, landing square on Jeremy's rear bumper and blowing him into the air. Jeremy let out a noise of frustration as Ryan overtook him yet again. I gotta know. It's gonna drive me nuts if I don't find out. Why? Jeremy shook his controller in frustration as Ryan's car pulled across the finish line split seconds before his. Ryan grinned at his victory, but it was hollow. I don't know. I just have to know. Ryan wasn't entirely sure what his own motivation was or why it mattered so much to him. Maybe it was just his innate sense of curiosity kicked into overdrive by what he'd been through, although he suspected it was something else. Jeremy put down his controller and stretched out. Whatever it takes, man, I'll help you find out. But right now, I'm going to bed. You gonna stay here? Ryan nodded. Alright. Night, Rye. Night, Lil J. Ryan loaded a new game in single-player mode and selected a long mission on the hardest difficulty. If he was going to be awake, the least he could do was earn himself some achievements. Ryan hadn't moved from the living room when he finally drifted off, passing out on the couch around 5 a.m. The quiet music lulled him to sleep, and the soft blue glow from the menu screen on the TV reflected off his too pale skin in the otherwise dark apartment. Less than an hour later, the whole penthouse awoke to horrific screaming. Jeff was the first to the living room, in only his underwear and socks, shouting, "What? Ryan, what's happening?" Michael was next behind him, then Jeremy and Jack, and finally Gavin, rubbing his face and still gripping his pillow. Ryan was completely asleep, screaming. They'd never heard him scream like that. They never thought they would. "Fuck, that's disturbing," Jack said, what everyone was thinking. Jeff took Ryan's shoulders and gently shook him awake, and the screaming stopped as abruptly as it started. Then Ryan burst into laughter. Not his dark, threatening laugh, but sincere, hysterical laughter. It was that uncontrollable, almost involuntary, high-pitched giggle he couldn't suppress when a video game glitched out in a funny way or Gavin did something particularly stupid. What the actual fuck? Michael looked mad but concerned, his expression reflected back at him in the faces of the others. Ryan looked confused but couldn't stop laughing. Between giggles, he managed, "I don't know. I can't stop." When he finally managed to control his laughter after a few deep breaths, he looked around at their worried faces. "So, what? Was I talking in my sleep or something?" Michael was the first to answer. "Dude, you were fucking screaming. It sounded like someone was murdering you." Ryan blushed but looked confused again. "I was? Sorry." "It was really loud, Rye Bread. Were you having a nightmare?" Gavin asked, still sounding drowsy. "I thought you didn't have dreams." "Screaming? Really? No, I don't remember." He looked up at them sheepishly. "It just suddenly seemed very funny for some reason." Everyone still looked concerned. Ryan's eyelids felt like they were made of lead. He let them fall closed for just a moment. "Dude, that scared the shit out of me," Jeremy said, running a hand through his hair. "Are you sure you're okay, Ryan?" Jack asked sincerely. "Mm-hmm." Ryan just hummed before he was completely out cold again. The crew looked at each other, a mix of worried, confused, and mildly annoyed expressions. Jack broke the silence. "Well, that was the weirdest fucking thing ever. Guess I'm awake now." "Fuck that. I'm going back to sleep." Michael wearily made his way back to his room, and the lads followed suit. Jack hesitated for a moment, shooting a worried look at Ryan, then Jeff, before heading back to his own bedroom. For Ryan to scream like that? Jeff sat heavily in one of the armchairs next to the couch, watching Ryan sleep, knowing he'd never have the slightest clue what was going on in his head, something for which he was ashamedly thankful.